building. Oh, oh, it's horrible.
quorum. First item, approval of the minutes of the February 11th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Can we start 1 minute?
Sir.
We just want to recommend, somehow we erroneously forgot about Peggy in the minutes, so we would like to have an amended to state that Peggy was present.
Okay, can we have amendment?
So moved.
So seconded.
The amendment been approved and seconded? All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, all in favor of the approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Minutes stand approved. Thank you. First item on resolution relative to the proposed amendment to a development agreement between the Community Development Authority of City of West Allis and Cobalt Partners LLC, Tax Increment District Number 16, within the 70th Street Corridor, West Corridor. Mr. Patrick.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have Sean outline, this is just, again, a reminder of where we're at with the current existing development agreement. We're going to do all our open items here tonight and then go into closed session on the where we're at in terms of negotiations on the proposed amendment to the development agreement. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean to outline some of the current conditions.
Thank you, Patrick. As you may recall, obviously this redevelopment is underway, TIF 16. The first phase of the development is pretty far along. They've renovated the buildings on the west side. They're about 3/4 of the way done with that. You've seen on previous agendas the event space that's going to be going in there, and they're sort of just working their way to the north on the west side of 70th Street. They've moved in the tenants from the east office building over to the west and are filling the spaces in the existing west office buildings, completely remodeled, refaced, interior redone. It's sort of brought up to today's marketplace standards. So a large investment in some old Allis Chalmers office space, which is what we love to see. The east side building's under demolition currently, and this is just sort of a vision for what it could look like. The future office space, 300 to 400,000 square feet of office space with structured parking and such. This is just a recent picture of the buildings being demolished on the east side of 70th Street. Obviously, along with those office spaces, part of the first phase. In fact, they're in for building permits for the hotel to go sort of on the south end of the development, and it'll be a home to suites hotel. I think it's about 110 keys, so that is part of the first phase guarantee. It's just another view of a future phase of the development that you can see would be going in on the east side of 70th Street, the office space. Again, to review the existing guarantee that's in place from the developer, which applies to the office spaces on the west side of 70th Street and the build out of the hotel, and then the balance of the land. They're guaranteeing that the $7.1 million on the rehabilitated west side office buildings, $8.5 million on the hotel parcel, and then $5.5 million on the balance of land. So they have a $21.1 million guarantee. If they fall short, they're required to make the payments equivalent to the debt service of that cost. Another part of the agreement is the McKinley Park agreement. The developer must either go ahead.
Just to say the McKinley Park, which is currently owned by the developer, and it's leased by the city. Yes, right now we lease it back for use as a public park. But like I mentioned before, it's a public park, but it's privately owned right now.
So it's an exhibit in the development agreement, and it basically, and then within the development agreement itself, this is the final exhibit that sort of points to the things. But the northern portion of the park, if they were going to develop it, they would have to give us, it's 2.2 acres. They would have to give the city six months notice, and they have to find a mutually agreeable 3-acre potential park area off-site. Or they could just simply develop all of this and leave this 2.2 acres be in place. So currently the neighborhood's sort of guaranteed a minimum of 2.2 acre park area, and if they were to develop everything on-site, they would get a 3-acre park area off-site. It would obviously costs money to purchase that land and all those things that goes with it. But that's the current agreement, the current state of the agreement.
That just lays out the 81 million.
So this just sort of lays out the overall, the initial development cost of, they're saying they're gonna, have a development cost of about 81 million for everything. They have now, raised that to about 135 million of taxable projected value. I think the remainder of this
Will be discussed in closed session. We just wanted to bring everybody up to date where we're at with the current agreement, so. We got
Any
item 3.
questions up to this part?
Can you go back to the slide that shows the park or a movement? Are the 2 aldermen from the district in agreement with that particular?
And that's the current provision within the existing development agreement, so the council approved, the whole entire council voted, or some may not have, I don't remember the vote offhand, but voted for this agreement, so.
I'm curious, if they take the 2.2 acres and therefore they have to find 3 acres, what if we can't agree to what the 3 acres might be?
That's a significant challenge.
And who's going to decide that that's agreeable?
Probably between the developer and the city attorney.
It's stated mutually agreeable.
It says
So
mutual
both parties
agreeable.
have to agree.
And we must be reasonable.
Alderman Grove?
I don't know what you meant by are they agreeing, the 2 aldermen, but I know myself, and it was Eric and Marty voted against that project. And, I mean, I know why I voted against it, but I believe they were not happy with the park situation.
We have some more insight to provide in the closed session on some changes to that subject.
All right, we'll hold the rest of our business for a closed session on that item, and we'll go to item 3. Resolution recommending the dissolution of Task Instrument District Number 9, Pioneer Neighborhood.
Mr. Chairman, at the last authority meeting, we kind of talked about this, closing the TIF and what can be done. So a TIF, when it reaches its point where it has no further expenditures, can be dissolved, or under state law, it can be kept open for 1 year, and the increment used for housing purposes. Now, 75% of those funds can be used, that's of the 300,000, can be used to do work for affordable housing, meaning housing that is at someone's income, 30% of their income. So I didn't do the math on that today, but it's definitely affordable level housing. Starts very similar to like Beloit Road senior housing. The remaining portion can be used to improve the housing stock. There are no limits in terms of the boundary, and there's no limits on the time frame on the use of these funds. So many communities are exercising the ability to extend the TIF 1 year in order to capture the entire increment to improve their housing stock in their community. So with that, as I mentioned, it's affordable housing is defined as housing that costs a household no more than 30% of their monthly gross income. So that relatively is creating a very similar to a lot of our federal programs that we have. Menasha, they did a review of this and exercised this on a couple of their TIFs, in which their goal was to improve their housing stock, increase median property values, reduce the trend in housing violations, maintenance, and things such as that. Home ownership stability, they wanted to keep people in their community and the ability to have them enroll in their school district. So there was multiple goals relative to why they did that. The programs that they created, they did multiple programs. They did a paint and restore, curb appeal, major renovation, first-time home buyer. These are all things that could be done under this type of concept. Oshkosh also did grants to help people buy homes within certain neighborhoods, to help strengthen their housing stock. They provided 5,000 forgivable loans as long as the person stayed there in that house for 5 years. So you're getting immediate benefit in terms of throughout the neighborhood. Some communities are buying up blighted properties. Some are buying or banking it to help with tax credit type of housing. Oshkosh, these are all the programs they funded out of a fund that is in the millions in terms of increment that it was gained from TIFs from that one-year extension. Sold on Oshkosh, these are initiatives to promote ownership, curb appeal. They started historic rehab, code compliance, and then they also on empty lots are incentivizing people to build new homes. So it's just kind of a very aggressive type of approach. As I mentioned, LIHTC, these are low-income housing tax credit developments where people have taken increment from TIFs and invested in these type of developments, gaining tax base and also meeting the need for affordable housing. This is in Fitchburg in Wisconsin. The reason we bring this to your attention is that the CDA and the Common Council has an option. They can exercise this right and gain the benefit in the community, or they can make a commitment to close the TIF. When you do the one-year extension, you're making a commitment to close the TIF just 1 year later. And I know there's certain aspects to this that could benefit our community for housing, as well as there's an approach to look at this from the financial aspect in terms of our budget. And I'm going to turn that over to Peggy.
Scribbled it down on the paper here just so you could see the numbers as I rattle them off.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
It just kind of lays out what the options are. Thank you. So we still have debt in the district for another 6 years, but that's okay because we already know we have the increment to cover that. So that's why it would need to be closed. So state law says when your TIF plan is covered and all the expenditures are covered, then the TIF has to close. So basically, right now, we have 3 options in front of us. The first one, and the first option has a April 15, 2020. State law changed 2 years ago, and it now requires us to do this by April 15th rather than May 15th. So it's a bit of a tight timeline. But basically, option 1 would be the city would close the TIF. If the city closed the TIF, right now, the tax increment or the taxes that are going to the TIF are $300,000. If the city closed the TIF, it's a long story, but there's a difference between equalized value and assessed value. For TIDs, we calculate on equalized. For taxes, we do assessed. So if we close the TID, there would be $290,000 in taxes next year, general fund taxes. Of that 290, 42.56% this year was the city's. So 123 would go to the city. There's also, in the levy limit restrictions, there's also a formula that we have to run through, and basically we would be allowed to increase our levy or increase our taxes by $54,900 next year. The remaining $68,700 would be what the state law requires us to do would be tax reduction, right? Because when the TIF closes, the thought is we want to make sure taxpayers get the benefit because they were not enjoying that benefit the whole time it was open. So that's a state mandated benefit that would go back to the taxpayers. So that would be option number 1. So the city would get $123,000 into the general tax base, and of that 123 would be able to raise our taxes by $55,000. Option 2 is what Patrick was alluding to with the affordable housing and improving the housing stock. And in that scenario, for next year, instead of the $300,000 going to the TIF, the $300,000 would go to the general fund for this affordable housing. And then once that 1 year is done, we would revert back up to option 1, and the rest of the things would happen. Option 3 would be is if there wasn't a decision by April 15, 2020, because we're still in the statutory spending period, this TIF is scheduled to close in 2033, which means up to 5 years before that it's in its spending period. It can spend money. If nothing happened, we could actually keep it open for another year. Nothing would happen. The money would accrue. There's no planned expenses. I guess if something came up in the district that was covered in the plan, you could use it. Otherwise, the disbursements to the taxing entities would just be after that. The second sheet that I attached there is just a little snapshot. When I get ready to close a TID, that's what I look at. I just make sure that all the revenues and expenses are recorded, and the time in which we have enough money to cover all of our future obligations, that's the time in which it closes. And in my calculations, that would be this year, if something else doesn't occur.
I also sent an article along from the League of League of Municipalities for Wisconsin that also talked about this and suggested communities look at this as an option for housing, so.
I'll start, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Alderman.
Yeah, I think my first choice would be to close the TID. And certainly there are novel ideas coming out of Oshkosh. I think that those are great. I'm definitely not in favor of building another affordable housing complex somewhere in our city like the Verona example. I think we certainly have done enough in the metro area to provide affordable housing. We as a city have. So I certainly wouldn't be in favor of any type of a new affordable housing complex. The Oshkosh idea is novel, but my first choice, I think, when we're looking at, and Peggy brought it up about hitting the expenditure restraint limits, anything that we can do to get more of a cushion under the state expenditure restraint program is something that we need to avail ourselves of. Additionally, if we're only going to have a Oshkosh type program available for a limited time, maybe a year or less, or whatever we can do with $300,000, which I imagine would be significant. It's not something we have any continuing funding for. I would encourage option one.
Mr. Clark.
I agree with Kevin. I think that my criticism of the TIFs has been that they've been so slow to get money back to the taxing authorities. And given the plight, the status of our city relative to finances in this year, I think we ought to move aggressively on option one.
Alderman Chapleski.
I agree with both of them. Looking at the financial situation of the city, we almost don't have a choice. That's the way I look at it.
Karen, did you have something to say?
Well, my thought when you first started going through all of this was, I mean, I know we have been very good at looking for opportunities and have resources to spend, dollars differently, and whether they're block grants or whether they're other federal grants of some sort. I guess over the years, it's almost seemed like we try to figure out a way to spend it. And, even with the Summit TIF, that one where we do have those resources yet that we're able to lend, I look at this too, it's $300,000, not significant dollars, but the management around it would probably take a lot of the team's time to manage that. So I would actually just support option one too, as it relates to, we do have a lot of TIFs running around the district, and I think from the taxpayer's perspective to close it, it's I mean, if we look at it on the scheme of things, we spent $300,000 around this table and nothing flat.
Alderman Grove.
Thank you. My understanding is with the Summit Place tip and the extension of lending money to people to fix up their houses, there aren't that many people taking us up on that. Is that correct, Patrick?
We have done a few. I don't have the numbers.
It's not like scale that you guys were all.
Correct.
And that's my thought. It's not like there's this need out there that people are saying, hey, we need this, we need that. I think we have, I think the CDA and the team, you guys do a great job at looking for those resources and capitalizing on them that we could.
Alderman Lysak.
I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, we're talking about giving away to other taxing bodies $170,000, which we could use in the city. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to watch the First District Forum last evening, but one of the questions brought up by the Liberty Heights Park Neighborhood Association and East Allis Association was a question on what can and what is the city doing to make housing affordable for new entrants into the housing market. And in fact, one of the candidates for alderperson there indicated that he bought his first house with a loan that was given to him by our housing department to fix up the house that he bought, and he ended up staying in there for 10 years or something. He bought another house in West Allis and is now running for alderman. I thought that was kind of interesting. So it creates kind of a feeling of well-being for the city, and gives the citizens, I think, a thankfulness to West Allis and kind of a commitment to stay here and improve the neighborhoods. It's my understanding that when we do these Summit Place TIFs and use that money, they're confined to a certain area. A good portion of it can be used anywhere in the city. So it doesn't have to be the first district. It can be in the 4th district, the 5th district, the 3rd district, where people have homes that need to be rehabbed. This could be an opportunity to use this money. Also, if you remember, you have $500,000, I think, roughly in home funds that you're looking for places to go. And rather than buy, like we've been doing, tearing down a house and building a new one there for 200-something thousand and turning around and selling it for 100 and something, it might be better to maybe use both of those types of funds to create more opportunities for home ownership in West Allis. One of the things that I hear all the time is, why do we have so many rental properties in West Allis? People move out and a flipper comes in and rehabs the house and rents it, and then he's an absentee landlord. I'd like to encourage more home ownership. And so, I think that maybe, I know it's easy, and my first inclination was the same as yours, but after thinking for a while, I think maybe we ought to at least consider doing something like the Oshkosh plan or something similar to that to encourage home ownership. And I think this is a way you could take some money and use it for that, and keep that extra $170,000 here in the city. I hate to give that to the other taxing bodies if I don't have to.
I'd like to, thank you, I'd like to ask Peggy if she has an opinion on this. I know you have an opinion, would you share it?
Will you share your
I think
opinion?
as far as an opinion, what Alderman Lysak said, it's always good to keep extra taxing dollars here so the city has local control of them. With that said, we have things other communities don't. Oshkosh doesn't have a TIF 7 rehab loan fund and a TIF 11 rehab loan fund and a TIF 14 rehab loan fund, or the availability of as many home funds and et cetera as we do. So we have something for those sources that they don't. That makes the decision harder, because you don't just take money because you can.
Peggy, what do you know about Oshkosh?
I
know you used to work there, yeah.
Actually, yeah, community development, I set that program up with community development back in 2009. So, and then the other thing I just wanted to tell you was, you have a chance to do this every time a TIF closes. This is not a one decision and done kind of thing. If you choose not to do it this time, totally fine. You can look at it next time. Maybe the funds are going to be in more need, or we have plans in place. The bad thing in Oshkosh is, we sat on that money for a lot of years. We started this in 2010. And so now they're getting around to spend the money, which is a really good thing. But it takes time to plan on what you're going to do too. So it's really the pleasure of the council on how they want to go about this. We could certainly put the money to good use, but there's management. All of the statements have been true so far.
Don, go ahead.
Do you know what the effectiveness is of the rent-to-own programs that Oshkosh has?
They're pretty good because they have some steep penalties if they're not. So if they don't stay there for so long, then it's not forgivable. If they stay there for 5 years, we had some that were 5 and some that were 10, where depending on the risk and what needed to be done, you basically got 20% or 10% forgiven each year. So you can basically craft this policy however the council and the CDA choose.
So are they utilized?
They are. It's been a slow climb. It was started off with a few things, but now they're actually, I've heard the word booming.
And one of my priorities is to change that dynamic from being a community of rental properties to a community of home ownership. So that's encouraging.
Go ahead, Alderman Grill.
Isn't there CDBG money available for option 2 for the low to moderate income people?
I mean, the CDBG funds can be used to rehab a house by income qualifying individuals, correct?
Isn't there kind of an overlap then?
There would be some, you just wouldn't have the federal restrictions because there's a lot of, you got to test for lead, you have to get multiple bids, you have to do a number of things under the federal program that we could craft this whatever way you want. It doesn't mean it has to be rehab. It can be money reserved for helping create a low tax credit senior development with maybe some other type of use incorporated into it. It can be done in multiple different ways, and we showed examples tonight, and then we could even come back later and say, okay, we did this, now what do we want to do with it? And kind of look at our strategic plan of the city. Somebody mentioned today, what about helping professional services individuals help buy a house here? With the housing stock improvement, that could be an initiative to help attract talent to our city. A lot of communities are dealing with the workforce housing issue. Multiple communities around the state they're just trying to get affordable housing in their communities. We have some affordable housing. Some of the conditions of those affordable housing units are starting to age. And then I think, I saw Ed Lasinski here a minute ago, our Director of Building Inspection, with the violations that we have on properties, anything we can do to help address those and arrest those particular situations would be helpful. But, this question is an opportunity for not only the CDA, but the council to make a determination. Either one is good. Both of them have positive aspects to them. So I don't personally have a preference either way, but, closing a TIF is good. Also improving our housing stock immediately and keeping money, as Alderman Lysak said, in our city is definitely an advantage too, so that we can maybe facilitate more development or fix up homes.
So if we look at some of our TIFs that are going to be closing in the next several years, do they have a larger pool of funds if we held them open for a year than 300, or is this 300, it just seems to me that for 300,000, there's a lot of pieces that need to be managed around it. So if you're doing it, in loans to someone specifically, someone has to manage those loans, someone has to collect those loans,
Right.
and we do have a lot of programs, and, Peggy, thank you for, that was my gut, that we probably have more access to some of those programs than the other communities do.
That's true.
So I think right off the bat, there's one big TIF, TIF 7.
Right.
That one's got a very, very large increment. That could be,
Right, so I think this is a
Definitely
good idea to
Some in
introduce to
place.
us, but then if we think about, let's look at it maybe more strategically, and instead of trying to manage a small pool of
Right, over the
dollars,
next 5
is there an opportunity moving forward? And then that'll give us more time to frame what we want to do and give some thought to it versus having this 300,000 sit. I think it's fair to also, even though I respect wanting to keep that 170,000 in our community, but there's also part of TIFs is getting them to buy in the first place, that they're not, and, everyone needs tax relief, so the county and, well, the school district just gives their money to contractors.
Peggy, when would the next one be available?
I don't have the full TID report here.
Ballpark?
I'd say 3 to 5 years, there's got to be another one coming due. I'm just looking, I know 5 is our distress TIF, the one that 15 is sharing with. However, it's going to be made whole in the next couple of years from the
okay.
sharing and the fire donations.
Sure.
So that one is certainly a candidate.
That's TIF number 5 is 6 points, and then we created TIF 15 as an overlay district.
Okay.
So that's the farmers market area.
Okay,
So that one's coming. I don't know the details of a lot of these, but 7 certainly isn't years and years away. And 6, I think, is in
That one
pretty good
could close,
shape as
yeah.
well. And that's a good size. For example, TID 5 is 3 times this TID.
Yeah.
TID 6 is 2 times this
Yeah.
TID.
Yep.
TID
So that gives
7
us-
is 7 times this TID.
Yeah.
So just to
Yeah.
give you a
That
little point of
perspective.
reference,
Mhm.
I would say those are the only ones probably in the near future that we'd be
Okay.
looking at.
Then we can do like something really big. It's a lot to manage 300 energy that goes around 300 grand, that if you can make those dollars have more impact. And
John has the floor.
You had mentioned that it took a while for Oshkosh to spend the money they had. Is there a spend down requirement on this 300,000?
No, and I was just thinking of that on the last comments. There's not a requirement to spend it anytime soon.
So we could pool,
Correct.
potentially pool the TID expiring
Yep.
into a bucket?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Gentlemen?
do we have to
Just
act
an
on this or
FYI, that
no?
is a draft, so that's not a final one.
Okay.
You're
Right.
welcome to keep it, but just know that it's a draft.
So, Mr. Chair, I move we proceed with option 1.
Second.
Any further discussion? Take roll call, please. Yes is to
Dissolve the TIF.
resolve the TIF, no is to all right.
And this will go to the council, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
We will be putting a resolution for dissolution and a resolution to extend on the agenda for next week.
Call
We
the
do it. Okay, Wayne Clark,
Yes.
Karen Gale,
Aye.
Don Niemer,
No.
Alderman Shaplewski,
Aye.
Alderman Haas,
Aye.
Jerry Motter,
Oh,
and Chris Saugsted's not present.
okay.
So we had 2 noes and
4 yeses.
4 yeses.
Right. We'll go to item E, consider relative report on redevelopment initiatives. Patrick?
I know.
There's one other item in there.
We know where.
Oh, excuse me, missed it.
I just think it's a lot
Update on
of
open
questions right
consultant
now.
contracts for various redevelopment sites.
Just, Mr. Chairman, we sent a spreadsheet out for the request of the authority that had all the open contracts. And I don't know if everybody printed their copy, or, this is all the open contracts per the developments.
Oh, here, this one's bigger.
I don't have one here.
This one's double the size.
I got a real small one. We can share it too.
Oh, you got one too. Anybody else need one? I have a bigger one here. You want a bigger one?
No.
Okay. So it's by development project on the left. It shows what amendments have been added and what the current balances of all the contracts that we have open for the CDA, for consultants to provide environmental services or financial consulting or design services. A few of these I don't see any further action on, such as the lime pit, which is where Glenn Reeder moved into. Summit Place, I'm not familiar of any additional work that would be needed there. Milwaukee Gray Iron is 84th and Greenfield, where Ogden is building the apartments. The reason we probably had it left open is that we just, I think in the development agreement, we may have to just assist in getting site closure at the end, once it's all built. And the same thing with the lime pit site, there's just the final, it's been built, it's been running, but it's a matter of getting the final letter from the DNR saying you're closed and no further action is needed. But some of these are to help with development agreements, and Concord Group on here help review the construction costs of the hotel built to 102nd and Lincoln. And that shows the current status of all the open contracts. Do we have?
Any
I'll answer any
questions
questions.
of Patrick in regards to any of these items? No? Thank you, Patrick. Item E then, consider relative report on redevelopment initiatives. Patrick?
Item on There we go. Element 84, 40 leases, so they're leasing the top floors first, then moving down in the building. They mentioned that they had 40 leases, around 90 prospects, so again, very good leasing that they're experiencing. Do we have people in there already?
Yeah, people are in, the 40 people are in.
Wow.
So they've opened up the third and fourth stories for tenancy, and they're working their way down. In the next few weeks, the second floor will be available. The first floor has a little bit more work to do, so that's probably more like 2 months, month to 2 months on the first floor, but things are going well.
So what is the number of units again? I mean, I'm trying to recall.
I think this is 203, and Mandel's 177.
Yeah. And they have one bedrooms, or are there some two bedrooms?
There's studios, one bedrooms. There's 32 different style units in the Ogden project.
32 different styles?
Yes.
In this
Yes.
one development, yeah.
Well, that's a little crazy. Well, at least then they're all have their own unique features. It's like a building in New York.
Universal Health Services, the behavioral health hospital, is set to break ground on April 2nd, around 11:30. We'll be sending out, I think they're sending out the invites, but I sent an email out the other day. I do have to let you know about that. 11:30 on April 2nd, that's the time that worked with the mayor's schedule. And we look forward to that particular event. They want to get press there and various things too, so.
6771 West National Avenue. There's a link there that you could we could click on it here. It's listed for lease. The developer's working very aggressively bring in tenants, showing them the property. They're going to be setting up shop there next Thursday and Friday and bringing in local restaurants and different leads that we've helped give them, as well as leads that they've found in the area. They've been having contractors through to sort of tighten up the construction budget. The main thing before they go to the next step is they just want to get the main tenant locked in before they take the risk of taking on the entire construction project. So they've been very aggressive. They've been in contact with us almost every day here for the last week or two. It was a good sign. We've been opening up the building for different contractors and subcontractors and such. So we're starting to see a lot more movement and aggressiveness from the developer.
We had a lead on our sheet from maybe 2 years ago, right? And we connected them today, and they're just ecstatic. Based on the response in the email, it's like, this is something we're totally interested in. So we're hoping that can work and help advance the project. Mandel. You can go back. So north of National Avenue, the apartments, they are at 70% leased. They are out of single bedrooms and single bedroom units and studio units. In fact, we had a meeting there yesterday where people came in looking for that unit, and they're turning people away because they just don't have that available anymore. So that's something that will factor in to how Mandel might approach the south of National Avenue. You might see in this site plan here, this L-shaped building. They maintain interest in building another apartment building. The recent number that he provided as of Monday night was 111 units of studios and one bedrooms with an outdoor pool and then an outdoor dog agility course. That was the word this morning, dog agility course. So we also met with the prospect that has interest in this spot. The prospect for the third time has committed, saying we really want to be there. So this Mandel really has to get this put together in terms of the financing and figuring out how to advance this project. The way that you might recall what this might look like is this is a property that's in Nashville. Sorry for the dark image, but it has an industrial look with more glass, and it'll be a 2-story building with a mezzanine overlooking their operation. So the business is very excited. They think there would be great synergy between the farmers market and their operation. They're cautious because they don't know what is in store for the balance of the site. And that is something that we're still working on. But Mandel understands the urgency, and we're hoping to help advance something here that maybe break ground by June. So he still has to put some numbers together, but he is modeling it after what the numbers were on the west, and then seeing how this is performed, and now putting that into the new performa for the building to the south of National Avenue. We had a constructive meeting. Again, we can't be more happy with the prospect expressing interest. We also know the prospect was maybe approached by other entities, so I think there's a pressure now to maybe to get going, and we think Mandel can come through on that, so. On West Lincoln Corridor, again, one of the fastest buildings I think I've ever seen built in our city.
It's been fun to watch, I'll say.
It's siding's going up, rock. This is outdated already. This building, I mean, it's going very fast, and I think before the end of the month, this building should be coming down. I think they have applied for demolition.
They applied today for a demolition permit for the Weir office building.
When did you say that would start?
Before the end of the month.
Not
Oh,
soon
no
enough.
kidding.
They applied today for the demo permit, so.
Wow.
One thing to
Is Brian
note,
gonna be
I
here
bring
for
this
the
up
first-
here because the developer has mentioned the condition of the fencing over Lincoln Avenue. You know, Alderman Chaplowski probably passes this daily going this way, and you don't notice it, but it's in really bad shape. It's like a chain link fence, like a jail yard looking condition, and it's in actually really deplorable condition. And he's asked if the state could look at cleaning that up. When you have so many people coming to this hotel, and you have this chain link fence on the bridge.
It's
Yeah, and it-
DOT fencing, and DOT said, no, we're not going to do anything.
So it's just something, I don't know what that fencing
Don't we have
costs.
money somewhere to do that?
Well, technically,
Like,
we wrote,
We did a TIF, didn't
we
we?
might have
do a
put some
TIF?
money in a half-mile radius, and I haven't looked at the total
Yeah, I
TIF
mean,
budget.
don't we have a TIF too? I mean, I think we should take that under consideration. And if
I don't
DOT's
want
not
to
gonna-
solve, maybe politically, we may have to approach representatives or something to help advance DOT to look at that.
Oh,
But-
San Filippo?
Yes,
Is that his district?
yes.
Yes.
So I'm just
You did
bringing,
take a
I'm just
call
bringing
from me
this
not
to your
long ago.
attention because that's come up multiple times now since he's been looking at this, and it's come up by other people about the condition of that fence, as well as a fence that goes along the freeway, which has overgrown shrubs that they say is a natural snow fence. The snow fence is actually within the shrubs. The original fence is still there, but the shrubs have overgrown them. But they said it's a living snow fence. Okay. That's the DOT's definition. But I bring this up,
Just one more question about that. The road, I don't know, that's at 102nd Street.
102nd
that
Street,
winds
right.
through
Yeah.
there. That thing's getting pretty rough. Is there any plans to do anything about the road?
we can look into that. We don't have any plans with the TIF dollars to do that. However, I bring this up because there's a sleep wellness building located just to the
Yeah.
south of the site that's for sale.
No?
Then there's a land there's a parcel that's tied in with it that's not developed. And then if you look, when you drive through here, every building has a for lease sign. And I understand one of them is actually sitting completely empty. It's because the DOT moved out.
I was going to say, wasn't that the DOT headquarters?
Right.
for the-
So I just bring this up because I've had a few inquiries asking if the TIF can be brought south into these particular buildings, and I've declined, but just something that I bring to the authority, just to bring to your attention. And there's some developer interest in maybe this whole corridor that maybe could address the road, and I'll know more about that on Friday. I'm just showing you that there is.
The construction, the entrance to that construction site, the road's really getting beat up right around there.
It's beat up all the way to the back.
Yeah.
Target, if you drive that back road.
I drive it all the time. so.
So again, this is the boundary of that TIF. So that's why we put it on here just so you can reacquaint yourself to what we did when we approved it. We
But
did,
Car dealerships like it, because then it ruins your car as you're driving.
You gotta go to the repair shop or buy a new car.
and that's all the, Rita, I gladly answer any other questions you may have. Lastly, 6610 West Greenfield Avenue, I didn't put a slide in here. We're set to close next week. Titles have been ordered, and we're working on the final documents for the attorneys to review. And So the reunion will buy 6610 West Greenfield Avenue. So we finally will close
The
that,
old Allis Chalmers
No, it's
Employment
payroll
Office.
office.
Payroll office, okay.
which will be preserved.
Employment
Good.
office.
Employment office?
Yeah, that's what I
Or
said
pa- oh.
first.
What, didn't they do the payroll out of there too? No? Okay. And then we would have closed session,
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
No further questions, and now we'll move into closed session. For agenda item 2, the committee may convene in closed session for provisions, section 19.85/1/E of the state's statutes for the purpose of delivering and investing public funds whenever competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session. The committee may reconvene in open session after completion of the closed session and consider the balance of its agenda. Can I have a motion to go into closed session, please?
So moved.
Second.
Would you take roll call, please?
Wayne Clark.
Yes.
Karen Gale.
Aye.
Don Niemer.
Yes.
Alderman Chapletsky.
Yes.
Alderman Haas.
Aye.
Jerry Motter.
Yes. We are now in closed session.